Tonight's rallying on the closed forestry roads around Bulahdelah and Stroud promises to be spectacular, with the dusty conditions presenting special problems for the drivers. With only a fraction of a second separating the top two contenders in the club championship, tonight's rally...
Second competitor, Pat Roberts from Port Macquarie, in a car that you'll see, in fact, 18 others, very similar to this. Datsuns dominate Clubman rallying. They're relatively cheap to build. You can spend $20,000 building a Datsun like this. Some competitors, though, built one for $3,500, $4,000. 2-litre engine, Webbers, better brakes, high-speed gearbox, and they're the formula for relatively cheap rallying. Pat Roberts from Port Macquarie. Fairly neat approach. Well, it was neat until he realised the course went one way and he went the other way. Now, this sort of an excursion is the sort of thing that happens in the forest at night, and you don't really hear much about it unless the navigator tells you. But it really is quite typical of rallying. And of course, it's why the cars have to be tough. It doesn't matter how well you strengthen a car. If you hit a big enough bump fast enough, you will bend something. All of these cars are using strengthened suspensions. Most are using gas pressure shock absorbers to resist any fade during the night of rallying. And they really are very, very controllable on a loose dirt surface. As you can see, the technique is impossible to get the tail out before the corner. It's much easier to drive a car on opposite lock than to run into that understeering situation, as we saw with both these cars. Pat's got it sorted out now, going very, very quickly on that downhill corner. That's quite a fast corner there. He seems to be a little bit hard to pick what gear he's in, but I would say he'd be well into third. Right, while you were away, we had Jack Whiteman from Newcastle having a similar excursion to Pat Roberts on that first right-hander just over the crest. So that's obviously going to prove troublesome for drivers who haven't really seen this course. Most of them haven't seen this course before. Car 4, Jeff Mackay and Mal Sinfield in yet another Datsun, one of the 19 Datsun 1600s. Quite an old car, 16-year-old, even older than some of them. But of course rebuilt, a bit like Grandma's axe, 10 new heads and 6 new handles. It's a brand new axe. And car 4 sputtering a bit there in the Webbers as he pumps some petrol into it and away. Now this is the corner that's tricky. Over a crest, quite loose on the outside. Drivers getting stirred up, accelerating, but through it nicely. Now here is where you can save time, but a little bit too far, bounces off the bank. The European style rallying when you start using the banks. Up into the right-hander, neat inside, looking for some traction again. It's where a lot of horsepower can help. You can dig through the loose stuff and really get some bite. Because it is hard on the tyres. A very competitive rally car can use up a set of rear tyres in as little as 100 kilometres. Most of these competitors, however, will not be changing tyres through the night unless they get a puncture. This is the amateur level of rallying. It's the aptly named the Clubman Rally, Clubman division of rallying, and it's where people can have a lot of fun but not too much expense. Not that rallying's ever cheap. Jeff Mackay doing a fairly neat job there. A little bit of a problem understeering on that downhill corner. Left and right down to the finishing marker, and probably 120. So on our unofficial timing, 120.5 is good enough to put Jeff in second position at this stage. Now back to the rally action at the Hillclimb stage of the NBN Classic Rally on the Newcastle Motor Racing Club land north of Raymond Terrace. Next car away, car 9. And Greg Cottam and Lance Robertson from Newcastle in Datsun. And we'll see if Greg can sort it out a little bit better than some of the earlier competitors. The tricky corner is this one over the hill. They can't quite see where they're going, arrive a little late, and very easy to run wide. But Greg has got it right. Now, big wide approach to that corner, and this time is looking good. Greg appears to be the fastest to this point so far. Uphill, nice tight line, not out in the pebbles on the outside. Looking for traction, blipping the throttle and attempting to find some traction. It's very loose, as you can see. Here's the little downhill loop. Staying tidy, up into the top now, up to the passage control. A lot of revs there. Greg's car, a highly modified Datsun 1600, 2-litre engine, Weber carburetors, and Greg doing a nice job, sorting this hill climb out pretty well. Staying in tight. Now it's a flat-out run down through this left and right-hander, setting up, flicking the car one way, then the other way, keeping the power into it. Nice tight line on the inside, and this looks like a very good time. 1:16.9. Good enough on our unofficial timing to put him into second place. Doug Briscoe in the Mazda Rotary, still fastest, car 1, with 1:16.4. But you can see there that Greg was doing it right most of the way, keeping the car in tight. And really that's how it is in rallying too. Car 11 now, we seem to have lost car 10, which was a Commodore, obviously failed to start. Gary Rees from Sydney, been rallying a couple of years. Yet another of the everlasting Datsuns, this one bored out to 1940 cc's. Most of them put out around 90 horsepower or so at the back wheels. So they're probably developing maybe 140 horsepower, some of them a lot more than that, at the flywheel. The hill climb presents something of a different sort of challenge for rally drivers. Most of the stages naturally are much longer than this, and there's always the feeling in rallying that you can pick up your mistakes later on. In fact, of course, it's not true. Once you lose, any fraction of a second is lost forever, and the top rally drivers treat every stage, no matter if it's 100 kilometres long, as a hill climb, looking for every tenth of a second they can save. But of course, to win, you also have to finish, and that means staying on the road. And that's the whole art of rally driving, finding that balance between going fast enough and staying on the road and keeping the car in one piece. Fairly cautious run there by Gary Rees. Realises he's got 430 kilometres to go through the night, doesn't really want to bend it on the first stage, with a time of 1:23.2. The principal, nice tidy lines on the corners.
Look serious, left hand smile. No, I'm sure.
Car 13, Mick Howard from Beresfield, and his wife, Marisa Howard, one of only 2 lady navigators in the event, or co-drivers. Her job to call out the very precise instructions provided to competitors throughout the night, read down the distance to intersections, call out any cautions of rough creek crossings, badly rutted roads, stumps on the side of the road, all the information that's provided by the rally director. I'm not quite sure whether she really called that corner. I would say that Mick Howard will get the rounds of the kitchen when he gets home for that sort of a mistake from his wife, who's sitting in the passenger seat and wondering what the rest of the night's going to be like. Obviously Mick isn't too worried. We can see him with a big smile on his face there, saying, made a mistake like that on television, I guess I've got to sort it out now. Whoops! Somewhere in there is a control official who is obviously could take up bullfighting. It just needs a little red flag to step behind. Mick Howard being very spectacular in the Datsun. Husband and wife team. going very quickly downhill. And finishing in a most spectacular manner somewhere in that dust is Mick Howard's Datsun, sort of on the road, but he's sorted it out now. Well, obviously his wife has lots of faith in him, is prepared to sit there. Here's a replay of Mick's fairly spectacular approach to the hill climb, and to the control official. Now that control official's try and get the card in the right-hand window, and Mick's not making it very easy. Nice little ballet step by eyes, provides a little bit better wear. There's a close-up there. You can see once you start pumping 100 horsepower or so through that, you're going to tear those chunks of rubber off fairly quickly when you're getting wheel spin. Can wear a tyre out in 100 kilometres or even less in a very, very powerful car. But most of these cars should see the night out on those tyres. Of course, in highly competitive rallying too, once the sharp edge is worn off the tyre, then you're losing seconds, and naturally you'd be looking, if you had a factory car, to be replacing those tyres. Steve Cox way in yet another Datsun. 19 of these Datsun 1600s, the absolutely typical Australian rally car now, making that typical mistake of most of the competitors here. It's a little confusing. They come over a hill, there appears to be a track ahead, they've been told there is a left-hander, but they're getting it wrong, and it's a case of reactions, just how well they sort that out. The rally could, of course, be won and lost on the hill climb. They'll lose points to the quarter of a minute here, and although it's unlikely, the event could be won by as little as a margin of a smaller margin of 1 point. So it is pretty important the drivers do get it right here, and as well, there's $100 waiting for the fastest time of the day, $60 for second place. So far, Doug Briscoe from Sydney in the Mazda Rotary has that fastest time of the day with 1:16.4. Steve Cox sorting out that downhill left-hander, setting it up through the sort of corner that rally drivers love, where you've got a left and right-hander. It's a case of setting it sideways into the first half, a little bit of overcorrection, the tail comes out the other way to line up down towards the exit, and a finish for Steve Cox, 16.4 the fastest. We'll take a break now from the hill climb section in the NBN Classic 300 Rally, and we'll be back. But Graham Evans from Newcastle, rallying for 3 years on the course in his Datsun 1600. I guess it's wrong to call these Datsun 1600s anymore. Most have 2-litre engines. And Graham making the mistake that's the nightmare for all rally drivers. Downhill corners are always very, very difficult on a loose surface. It's a case of deciding early enough that you can get round the corner and get off the brakes so that you've got some steering, get on the power. Decide too late, and you really have to do what Graham did there and decide discretion is the better part of valour and stop. There's probably been more rally cars go off on downhill downhill corners with loose outside surfaces than any other sort of corner or sort of situation. Peter Roberts, brother of Pat Roberts, car 2 in the event. Peter and Pat both from Port Macquarie. Peter rolled this car in the last event, said he's determined to keep it the right way up this time. Drives with a lot of verve, and having that trouble with that first corner, sorted it out though before he wasted too much time. Found the tight one, and now getting down to the serious business of the hill climb. You see the right-hand side of the car still bearing some scars from the last event in which it rolled. These cars are pretty tough though. They easily put them back on the wheels and away they go again. All are fitted with roll cages, and naturally the crew wearing harnesses. Safety is of major consideration to rally drivers, as in all motorsport. They make sure any sharp projections around the inside of the vehicle are either padded or well out of the way of any arms and legs, anything that might contact in the event of an accident. Now, that was getting that left-hander neat and tight on the inside, and this could well be the way to pick up time. Not being spectacular, but finding the fast way. And 1:23. So perhaps a little bit slow, perhaps a little bit too cautious. Perhaps it was 1:19. We think we might have been a little cautious with stopping the clock there. So for Peter Roberts, slightly better time than appeared on the screen. Next up, Chris Jensen. You can see the alloy roll cage that we talked about earlier in there, right through the car. Hold the roof up in the event of a roll. Chris Jensen from Newcastle, having his 5th rally in this event. Now we'll see how Chris sorts out this problem corner when drivers are apt to go the wrong way. Seems to know that way. But has decided that there is a much shorter way to the finish line and is headed off down entirely the wrong road. Of course, this sort of thing in rallying can easily happen out in the forest at night, but nobody sees it. When you're watching on television, it's a little bit embarrassing. The whole point of rallying, of course, is that the car is running against the clock. Competitors are set effectively an average speed for a section, but that average is always impossible. So it's really a case of finding the fast way around, and of course it does have to be the right way. Chris Jensen having more troubles, turning right instead of left on the loop. And under the rules of rallying, had he continued, he'd have entered a control point up there from the wrong direction. Up to the control official. Chris Jensen away down the hill, having made a couple of wrong directions so far. And understeering very much on that downhill corner. Being more cautious on this one. And looking for the finish line. Well, of course, that's where consistent driving can often put a low-powered car well up in a rally. The driver or the crew that work well together, call their corners accurately, and don't waste a 10th here and a 10th there, can easily end up saving minutes throughout the night. Car 24, Andrew Chapman. First time out in this car. His first Clubman event, has only run in a couple of minor rallies previously, and Andrew will probably be feeling his way in this event. Although so far he looks very neat and tidy. The car obviously nowhere near as powerful as some of the earlier Datsuns. Car 24 of 32 starters, a couple of non-starters. So in fact around 30 cars competing in the NBN Classic 300 Rally. Event will take them up into the forestry country in the Stroud-Bulladila area throughout the night. Something like 300 kilometres of competitive motoring. Forestry roads closed to other traffic, and drivers having to drive pretty much as you're seeing them here right throughout the night. Actually, that calls for a lot of concentration and skill. But rallying seems to get into the blood. Most drivers who take it up seem to keep coming back and back to have a run. There's certainly something fairly exciting about setting the car up, getting it sideways through the corner, feeling the balance of power and steering. And especially satisfying when you...
Only 15 made it to the finish line. Matthew Clark reports.
Most of the drivers who withdrew from the rally did so during last night's tough sections through the forestry areas around Bulladila and Stroud. With drivers moving at excessive speeds, the night sections posed special problems, and the extremely dusty conditions made the driver's task all that more difficult. The majority of people who pulled out did so because of mechanical failure, but for some, errors in judgment sent their cars over embankments or into trees. No one was hurt in the handful of crashes, but it emphasised just how difficult the sections were for both the navigators and drivers. Locals John Dean and Paul Bramble in car 6 took out the rally with an outstanding performance, finishing 2.5 minutes ahead of second place Doug Briscoe. With the rally organisers still working up the final placings in the Clubman Championship, it appears Brian Fisher and Peter Berryman in a stanza have just edged home ahead of the car of Pat Roberts and Steve Wallace. Local driver Greg Cotton withdrew from last night's rally with mechanical trouble, but still managed to take out 4th place in the championship.